Many friends have told me, please continue speaking. Some people need to hear these words. But at the same time, I am also very aware there is significant psychological resistance to this topic among Western audiences. Regarding this issue, I feel a responsibility to do my best to remind everyone to be cautious and mindful. I am not trying to tell others how to live their lives, but rather hoping that when making decisions that may carry risks, one can pause and carefully consider the pros and cons and potential consequences. Life itself is complex and can become fragile due to seemingly insignificant choices, and every decision we make is worth careful consideration. Caution does not equal fear. It means valuing ourselves and those around us enough to make wiser decisions. I also hope my reminders can be understood as a form of care and goodwill. In a world filled with various influences and pressures, timely, gentle reminders may be a way of protecting one another. Ultimately, I hope to create an atmosphere where freedom, responsibility, and mutual respect can coexist. We can respect each other's choices while also looking out for one another. In this spirit, I will continue to do my best to provide reminders, not as an imposition, but as a sincere encouragement, hoping that everyone can face life's journey with clarity, caution, and love. Here, I ask you to honestly ask yourself a question. How much of your judgment comes from personal experience? Perhaps you know someone who has suffered from drugs. Perhaps someone you know seems fine for now. Some may even say, you have no right to discuss it if you haven't experienced it. But the fact is, human judgment is easily misled by experience. Experience is one-sided, selective, and delayed in its manifestations. Many risks do not occur immediately, are not evenly distributed, and do not manifest in everyone. That is why we need data, statistics, and scientific research to help us transcend personal perspectives and reach objective conclusions. If we are willing to temporarily set aside personal opinions and look at the data, there is one fact that is almost undisputed. In contemporary Western society, drug problems are not marginal phenomena, but systemic, intergenerational social issues. Whether in Europe or North America, official public health data repeatedly shows the proportion of non-medical drug use remains high. The age of drug use continues to decrease. The mental health system is highly intertwined with drug use. Emergency incidents, psychiatric hospitalizations, suicides, and violent events related to drugs continue to rise. In this context, hallucinogens are being repackaged, re-narrated, and gradually destigmatized. It is important to emphasize that destigmatization does not mean de-risking. Firstly, what are hallucinogens? Hallucinogens usually refer to substances that induce altered consciousness, distort perception, and a sense of self-dissolution, altering perception, cognition, and emotional states. The risks of ingesting hallucinogens that bring about high-intensity experiences include panic, anxiety, paranoid episode, bad trips, which can last for hours or even lead to long-term trauma, loss of self, reality distortion. Some individuals may never be able to return to normal, triggering mental illness. Those with a family history for mental illness are especially at high risk. Psilocybin may trigger mental disorders in vulnerable populations, and these consequences are unpredictable before use, and lead to symptoms like visual lingering, hallucinations, sensory confusion persist even after discontinuation. Therefore, The psychological risks of hallucinogens far outweigh the physiological risks, especially in non-medical settings. Additionally, cognitive impairments caused by ingesting hallucinogens often lead to dangerous behaviors. Post-use can result in loss of sense of time, space, body boundaries, leading to jumping from buildings, drawing, self-harm, thinking they can fly, traffic accidents, streaking, attack behaviors, violent actions. Hallucinogens do not directly induce violence, but altered cognition can lead to high-risk behaviors. Traditionally, hallucinogens do not cause physical withdrawal symptoms, but can lead to psychological dependence and ritualistic misuse, forming a strong pursuit of experiences, chasing the high, leading to increased frequency of use, escalating doses, lowered risk assessment ability. Furthermore, a large number of cases indicate that a considerable proportion of initial hallucinogens users subsequently turn to MDMA, ketamine, or even more addictive substances like cocaine and meth. This is considered a manifestation of the evolution of psychological risks in the gateway drug research. Therefore, while hallucinogens are not typical addictive substances, they can form deep psychological dependence and behavioral habits and may serve as a prelude to more dangerous drugs. In discussions surrounding hallucinogens, we often hear a seemingly rational and even tolerant statement. Anything itself is neutral. It depends on how you use it. While this statement may hold true in many everyday situations, when it comes to hallucinogens, this judgment is scientifically unfounded. The need to clarify this is not out of a moral stance, but because this statement misunderstands how hallucinogens act in the body and underestimates their impact on individual judgment capacity. From the perspective of neuroscience, we uncover a fundamental difference. In everyday life, we tend to think of a tool as something external that remains fully under the control of the user's intention, like a knife, a car, or a piece of technology. These tools do not change the structure of the user's judgment. The person retains the ability to evaluate reality and maintain behavioral control. But psychedelics are nothing like that. Psychedelics do not act on just one part of the brain. They actively interfere with multiple core regulatory systems, including reality tasting systems, which help us distinguish between what is real and what is imagined, emotional regulation systems, which helps prevent emotional overload and stabilize meaning, impulse control systems, which suppress dangerous behavior and allows us to delay gratification. These are not optional features. They are the very foundations of human rationality and self-governance. Once a psychedelic substance enters the body, it does not simply wait to be used correctly. It immediately begins altering the operation of these systems. In other words, under the influence of psychedelics, the brain's judgment mechanisms themselves have already been changed. This leads to a critical and often overlooked fact. The user, during the very process of using the drug, loses the ability to use it properly. From a scientific standpoint, the idea of correct use becomes self-contradictory. On one hand, proponents claim that psychedelics change consciousness, alter perception, or dissolve the self. But on the other hand, they assume the user remains rational, stable, and clear-headed enough to make sound decisions during that process. Neuroscience tells us the opposite. Psychedelics operate precisely by diminishing those judgment capacities. It's like removing a car's braking system and then telling the drivers to drive more carefully. The risk does not lie in the driver's attitude. It lies in the mechanical failure of the system itself. Therefore, the real danger of psychedelics is not just that some people use them recklessly, but that the very act of using them inherently impairs our ability to assess and control risk. Another widely misunderstood error is how the effects of psychedelics are interpreted. Under their influence, many people do report intense subjective experiences, heightened emotions, an amplified sense of meaning, and a feeling of deep connection to others and the world. From a neurological perspective, this is understandable. Psychedelics temporarily disrupt the brain's default network structures that usually filter information and limit associative links. This causes a flood of sensory data, memory, and emotion to be activated all at once, creating a subjective feelings of fullness, unity, and intensity. The problem is, this feeling does not equate to functional improvement. Data shows, when the experience fades, the problem often returns. In more rigorous long-term follow-up studies, a recurring pattern emerges. Once the drug's pharmacological effect wears off, the original psychological issues are rarely resolved. Common outcomes include depression and anxiety symptoms returning after temporary relief, a sense of emptiness or disillusionment due to the contrast between the peak experience and the ordinary life, a desire to re-experience the high, leading to psychological dependency. When the brain has been artificially pushed into an unusual elevated state, normal life begins to feel flat, boring, and insufficient by comparison. This contrast effect can erode one's patience for gradual, sustainable improvement in real life. From a neurobiological standpoint, this is not healing, it is reinforcement. True psychological healing, as seen in the brain, typically involves gradual strengthening of emotional regulation, reduced impulsivity, increased resilience to stress, improvements that are slow, stable, and sustainable. Psychedelics, in contrast, produce short-lived, high-intensity, altered states. These states do not naturally transform into long-term capacities. Psychedelics function more like accelerates of emotion, not healing mechanisms. So, when we say psychedelics are not neutral, this is not an emotional condemnation or a dismissal of personal experience. It is a conclusion drawn from neuroscience and long-term data. Psychedelics are not simply tools that depend on how you use them. They are chemical interventions that change how you evaluate whether to use them and how much is appropriate. And any substance that impairs judgment itself can never be called neutral. That is the core danger at the heart of this issue. We need to recognize that the greatest danger of psychedelics does not lie in whether they are deadly, nor in whether they are traditionally forbidden. The real risk lies in this. They appeal precisely to one of the most beautiful and yet most vulnerable human desires, the profound longing to transcend the self, to break through inner limits, to merge with the cosmos, to feel at one with all existence. This longing in itself is sacred. It is the very root from which philosophy, art, spirituality, and even science are born. And yet, precisely because this desire is so powerful, so moving, and so easily manipulated, we must approach it with deep awareness and compassion. A true sacred experience never depends on external substances to lure us. True expansion of consciousness never comes at the cost of abandoning responsibility. Authentic spiritual growth always deepens our relationship with the real world rather than pulling us far away from it. From the perspective of relational non-duality, we do not see the individual as a separate, isolated entity. Rather, we are always already embodied in a flowing field of relationship with others, with society, with nature, with the unfolding of life itself. Every action, every decision affects not just me, but the entire fabric of those relationships. And it is through these relationships that we learn, grow, heal, and awaken. That is why we speak not only for individual freedom, but also for mutual care within relationship. Freedom without responsibility easily becomes recklessness. Exploration without empathy turns into danger. Healing without structural repair often becomes fleeting escapism. What we advocate is not suppression, but a deeper kind of participation, one that takes responsibility for both the self and the others, for the present moment and for the future. We are not rejecting all exploration, nor denying the reality of all experiences. Rather, we are inviting each other to slow down on this path of discovery and to re-examine our inner compass. Are you truly moving towards deeper connection? Or are you chasing yet another illusion? Do you still retain the capacity to discern? And are you willing to take on the gentle responsibility of caring for the safety of others? Dear friend, perhaps your heart already holds an answer. I want to thank you for your openness, your attention, and your willingness to walk with me through this difficult but sincere reflection. Rationality is not coldness, but a form of deep care. Disagreement is not hostility, but an opportunity to learn together. Life is not meant to be a series of quick, peak experiences. It is a slow, profound, and relational woven journey of becoming. It's my honor to walk that road alongside you. I will see you in the next episode.